Star Trek Prodigy, Season 1, Episode 7.
Never trust a Romulan with first contact.
Nope.
Romulan.
No, Ferengi.
I mean, a Ferengi.
Yeah.
Well, never trust a Romulan with first contact.
No, yeah,
either,
never
sorry.
trust Romulan, period. But Ferengi, similar situation, but for different reasons.
Wow, how am I the one that got that right?
But I meant to look that up, but I wonder if Nandi is a thing in Ferengi. Like that's a... Because that came up in the Star Trek game as well.
You know, this is basically this has basically become Guardians of the Delta Quadrant, because she's basically Yondu with fewer scruples, and that makes him Quill. Yeah, checks out. And that makes Gwendala Gamora. Rocktalk is Drax, probably. And Murph is Groot. And Dinkumpog is Rocket, the raccoon. It checks out.
Yeah.
One thing that was kind of interesting to me was, okay, so they were in the Delta Quadrant. They got to the Gamma Quadrant with the Protostar doing it super jump. And they ran into a Ferengi. It's like, how are they getting to all these quadrants? Like,
yeah, but also she knew, at least knew of the diviner enough to have sold. She didn't know of the diviner, but she knew
enough
she
to have
sold him
sold
to
Dal into
Yeah.
into servitude. But like, how did she get out there? It's the
Yeah.
Delta Quadrant. Like, how did you get out there?
Well, I mean,
Could have
to
been
be
I guess not
fair,
quite as deep
she
into the
sold-
Delta Quadrant as Voyager got thrown.
Yeah,
But
and she sold. They're probably at a cusp area, like towards the edge.
yeah, they're because between the
Um,
Alpha and the Delta, because I'm curious about these distances because they jump to the Gamma and she's over there, so it would have to be near the circle. Because then again, it couldn't be very deep into the Gamma Quadrant because then you'd run into the Dominion.
mhm.
At some point, you'd run into the Dominion because they're huge, and which getting out, it's like, well, there's ways that she could get out into the Gamma Quadrant easily enough because you just have the Majoran wormhole. You could have just taken that, and
Mhm.
it wouldn't be weird for Ferengi to be out in the Gamma Quadrant doing business with the Dominion. They were doing that all the time in DS9. They were going out and trying to do contracts in the Dominion, so it wouldn't be that weird for Ferengi to eventually be back in the Gamma Quadrant doing deals. But like, however, how these have to be like right across the border in the Delta Quadrant, and it has just like how all these Alpha Quadrant, all the Alpha, you have a Tellarite.
That explains why Alpha Quadrant species like the Tellarite and the Medusan and all that jazz.
Is Medusan Alpha Quadrant?
Well, I mean, Medusan is from, I think, the first series, wasn't it? TOS?
I don't know. I don't remember. I don't think I've seen that yet, but
I know they are from one of the classic series. I'm pretty sure it was TOS or TAS.
Well, at any rate, Yeah, I know at least the Tellarites Alpha Quadrant species, so like how are they playing around in the Delta and Gamma? And it's got to be closer, not as deep into the Delta Quadrant as Voyager had to go, because they were slated to be there for
Also,
decades.
yeah. Also, the ship got lost, and like the ship probably had just gotten to the Delta Quadrant when it got lost.
Oh yeah, now I remember that uh Tellarite said something about a sleep ship. So maybe Tellarites were doing a deep space exploration into the Delta Quadrant, and that's how he. So I seem to remember him saying something about that. I could be wrong. I remember him talking about that. Like,
Yeah, he did mention a sleep ship.
yeah, so that might explain how the Tellarites ended up in the Delta Quadrant. Like they were doing a deep, long haul exploration of the Delta Quadrant, and that's how they got out there. How he got out there. Some of them might be just Delta Quadrant species.
Like Rock Talking Doll.
Yeah, we don't know. Well, for all we know, Dow could be a Gamma Quadrant species because he ran
Maybe.
into Nandi, and so
True.
he's probably
Yeah.
either Gamma or Delta, depending on that. But there's no telling.
And it would like nobody else knows what he is either, because like they aren't from the a lot of them aren't from the Gamma Quadrant, so they don't know the species that live there.
Yeah, so it could have been. Yeah, very possible he could be some sort of Gamma Quadrant species that we just never met. We didn't really meet a lot of Gamma Quadrant species in DS9. We met a few, but not everything because the Dominion is massive. And they were kind of at war at the time, so it's kind of hard, hard to set up. Oh yeah, well, we're going to explore and do first contact with all these species. The Dominion says no. But war. Dominion says no. But I wanted first
Is that your response when you started watching DS9? Be honest.
No, not really. I like DS9. It's up
But
there.
I wanted to explore this. No. But you have a wormhole. Yeah, no.
Well, it's the exploration is basically the same but backwards. You just, instead of going to planets, you generally have planets come to you. They're all about all kinds of species. And one of the great things about DS9.
In Dominion Gamma Quadrant, planets explore you.
Kinky.
Well, and one of the things that we did get an exploration, but it was of species we already knew existed. Like, we got more lore in DS9 for the Klingons than pretty much anywhere else in the whole series up until that point. Like deep lore as to what their culture's like, all this sort of stuff. They're not just one-off little episodes or what Worf tells us. We actually see more Klingons and see them acting like Klingons, and we get to see all sorts of interesting culture. Now, we still see it through Worf to a certain extent, but we also get Martok and Gowron, and we see kind of more of the machinations of the Klingon Empire. And we get to spend more time with Klingons more regularly. We also spend a lot more time with Romulans too.
Yeah.
We get to see Romulans on a more regular basis. They're basically what you expect. Oh, and Cardassians. We get to see lots of Cardassians. Like, it's a huge thing. You know, Bajorans and Cardassians, we see so much more Bajorans and Cardassians than we ever did before.
Yeah, but it's so hard to keep up with them.
I mean, to be honest, I kind of have trouble like keeping their names separate because they just sound so similar.
Yes.
Well, ask which one of them can do the neck trick. Is that what it's called? The Cardassian neck trick or something? We never see it done, but we know it. It's just sort of one of those things that's sort of thrown off to the side, and it's never really explained.
I'm pretty sure the neck trick is basically them ruffling their gills.
Again,
They got gills.
Like again, that doesn't really separate them that well.
Well, from the Cardassians and the Kardashians.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at least one of them has gills because with all that plastic surgery, I mean, come on.
That reminds me of a meme. Hey, welcome to Plastic Surgeries Anonymous. I see a couple new faces here today, and I must say I'm very disappointed.
I love how they were entertaining themselves by like, ooh, let's see how far we can teleport stuff.
Yes. No, they weren't entertaining themselves. They were exploring the expanse of their abilities.
Okay, so I have to admit, when I first saw like that apple pie, whatever kind of pie was disappearing, right? I was at first I thought, okay, they're trying to figure out how far like the matter like maker or whatever can like make food or stuff. It's like, oh no, they're actually teleporting stuff, and then they teleport Murph to outside the ship.
Yes. It's like, he's right here. The reading says he's right here. Look there. Oh. Look at you, Murph.
And as we expected, we kind of got more of as we're unraveling all the data, like we're finding out that Gwyn's people were the one that attacked the protostar in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Caused the whole problem in the first place.
That robo.
Yes, because we see the robot. Let's see. Yeah, and let's see. Let's see. What do we got? Make first contact. They screw it up.
That was a pretty song. Although the whole, we bring you this this precious metal thing. What do you? We want. What would you like for a cultural exchange? The whole giving them a song thing reminded me of Air from My Lungs.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, here is a fine piece of metal from outer space, and here is air from my lungs. At least the song wasn't the Britney Spears Toxic.
Or Justin Bieber's Baby.
No, the Britney Spears Toxic was a reference to the Doctor Who episode. Because that's the song that played. It's like, and here is a classic Earth ballad. And it's toxic. Which ironically isn't as toxic as Justin Bieber.
Anyway, back on task. So yeah, now Dal and Gwen have something in common, I suppose.
More in common. The whole
Yeah, betrayal of a parental figure.
Like parents, man, F them.
And it
no,
does
don't F
it
them.
does really explain some of go to explain how some of Dal's attitudes towards trusting people.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he was raised by a Ferengi. Oh, well, that just makes too much sense.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah. Uh, anything else?
And she's betrayed them,
Yeah. Well, that was
to be expected.
to be expected.
Sad, but not surprising.
Yeah, I mean, she needs to take some pointers from from Star-Lord's adopted father.
Right? Freaking Yandu sacrificed himself.
Yeah.
And one of the things I also wanted to say, reminded me is like, though we do get to see Dal be clever in getting the rock back, the crystal
Teleporting
back.
the
It's like
thing.
just slap his comm badge on it and go beam it up.
Yeah, that was a nice little sleight of hand moment. And she
Like-
deserved it.
Like, no, 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 no. I'm still trying to get like the point of like being in a society civilization where it's like you don't really need anything because you got machines that can literally make anything. So what's really the point of like, ooh, I want this or this
Well, it's the
or
same
this?
reason why billionaires still try and make more money.
Yeah, true.
Like, yeah, they could have anything they wanted at a moment's notice. Oh, you want a McDonald's double cheeseburger? Just yes, Susan, get me a McDonald's double cheeseburger. Okay, yes, boss. I'm at a moment's notice. He could, more money than he could ever spend, but still wants to stack up more. Like more than he could spend, more than his, any kids he has could ever spend. It's like, no, but billionaires still go after it. And the same thing with like Starfleet. It's like, why would you join Starfleet? You can, like, Earth is a paradise. You don't really need to do anything. But some people want to go out and do explore and see new worlds and new peoples and
new civilizations.
yeah,
To boldly go where no one has gone before.
yeah, all that sort of thing. And and
Hey, you
there's
started it.
yeah, well, and there's glory to be had, and there's prestige, and I'm sure to some extent there might be, you know, like if you're in Starfleet, well, you might have dibs on, say you wanted to live in San Francisco. I'm sure to a certain extent, like Starfleet has some dibs on making sure their people can find housing in San Francisco because that's where that's where a lot of Starfleet is based. So like that's a big part of where Starfleet is based. So I imagine if you wanted to live in a particular place that has a Starfleet thing, you got more chance to do that. Yeah, some of it's dreary, but like if you're just like I want to do something that isn't just be on Earth. It's like I want to explore, I want to do stuff. Well, that's what you go into Starfleet for. It's for glory,
Yeah.
for prestige. Then you can go if you can walk around in a you walk around and you're a lieutenant in Starfleet. Like, that's some clout.
So
And some species do still use monetary.
true. So something that occurred to me, and I never really thought about it until this episode, but do Starfleet ships not have cloaking devices?
No.
No.
Well, in fact, that's a thing that comes up occasionally. Starfleet ships. There's a Treaty of Algernon, something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, the treaty with the Romulans. There was a Romulan Federation war, and they signed a treaty in which case they established the neutral zone and did a few things. And as part of the treaty, I'm sure they got something from the Romulans. We don't know everything about the treaty, but the Federation agreed not to pursue cloaking technology. They probably got something in return from the Romulans, but essentially, Federation doesn't pursue that. Now, how much that treaty holds up with the destruction of Romulus and whether the Star Empire sticks together, I haven't watched Picard, and that's post Supernova, so don't know how much that holds up. But yeah, and like that's why anytime they want a cloaked ship, they gotta steal it or talk to somebody or get the Klingons to help them or something. They either have to talk to the Romulans themselves or borrow a Klingon ship whenever they want to do something with a cloak, generally.
Okay. Because I figure it's like they're probably smart enough to, have the technology, so I was like curious. Like,
Well, if you don't mind being spoiled a bit, I can talk about an episode.
Wait, have you ever jumped ahead of these episodes?
No,
that's not what he's talking about.
From Next Generation.
Oh, no, go ahead, because I probably won't ever watch that.
Okay. In fact, it comes up as a thing because at one point, okay, so most species, most powers would, if they were trying to build a cloaking device, would just try and copy like a Romulan or a Klingon cloak. They would just try and the basic cloak. Starfleet instead built a phase cloak, which basically let them phase through matter. As long as the cloak was on, they could just go through matter. They could fly through matter with like it was not there, and they would be out of phase with reality, so you couldn't do anything
Kitty
to them.
Prided that shit.
What?
They Kitty Prided that shit.
Yeah, essentially they can. Yeah,
Shadowcat.
Yeah. But yeah, they can just go through solid objects with this cloak up. You can't detect them; they're out of phase. You just don't see them. And if you know who Riker is, okay, he was on this ship called the Pegasus. Well, they screwed up the cloaking device power fluctuation while they were inside. I think while they were inside an asteroid or something, and it got stuck, and most of everybody died except a few people who got away. And so this was secret, deep secret, double classified, double secret class, because this was breaking treaty stuff. Like this is stuff the Federation is just not supposed to have. And so eventually it comes an episode where they go and retrieve the for various reasons, the Enterprise goes and retrieves the Pegasus, and gets the cloak off of that, and actually equips it to the Enterprise D, the TNG Enterprise, and uses it. And there's Romulans nearby, and they come out of the asteroid, and they could have taken off and gone away, and nobody would know anything. Picard's like, no, drop the cloak. As soon as they got clear of the asteroid, it's like, drop the cloak. What? Drop the cloak. It's like, and the look on the Romulan's face when it's like, oh yeah, no, we have a phase cloak. We'll talk about this later. It's like, because they don't even have that. Like they have a cloak, but they only use like a basic cloak. And
It's
apparently,
an invisibility
yeah,
cloak.
yeah, they don't
It's
have
that
a
Harry
phase
Potter
cloak.
shit.
I think I'd heard that they'd worked on that, but like they'd worked on phase cloaks, but the Federation was way ahead of them on this. Like it had been a while. Like this was earlier in Riker's career, and he was now at the so it's been a while since they had this project was going. So yeah, this was double secret. So yeah, Federation is not supposed to. They've made agreements on occasion to use cloaked ships or to have a cloaking device. When they were at war with the Dominion, the Romulans loaned the Defiant a cloaking device on the condition that there's a Romulan officer keeping it safe and secure, and that they give them any information that they pick up in the Gamma Quadrant while they're surveying stuff. And so, but yeah, that's basically Federation cloaking. I'm sure I've messed up some little nitpicky detail here and there, but that's why why they don't have cloaking devices.
And also why in lower decks they had to steal that one bird of prey in order to use the cloaking device to get the guy back.
Yeah, because the Federation doesn't have cloaking device, or isn't supposed to. I'm sure they have all of the. They probably know enough about the cloaking device to, at this point, with as many times as as much as Starfleet intelligence mucks around, I'm sure they know exactly how to build a cloaking device, but they don't because that would break the treaty. Now, could they, if they war broke out with the Romulans, could they make and distribute cloaking devices? I think so. I think if the supernova hadn't happened and a war broke out with the Romulans, the Federation would have gone, okay, we're ripping up the treaty. All right, we're going to replicate all those phase cloaks. Remember that phase cloak from back then? Yeah, we're going to just replicate a bunch of those. Teach all our engineers to put them on ships, and oh yeah, all our ships are going to have phase cloaks. And just give the Romulans a double middle finger. It's like, what you gonna do, Romulans? You can't find us. You tore up the treaty. Double middle finger. We're gonna use whatever the cloaks we want. Meanwhile, the Klingons are laughing their asses off at this, and it's like,
I just thought of something that you could use that phase cloak with with a warp drive and just like zoom through planets and stuff.
Well, you don't need to because that's what navigational computers and all that is for.
I know, but you wouldn't need the navigational computers. It's just like, let's go now. Zoom.
Navigational computers are a little easier to deal with than cloaks, so.
True.
Also, I think there's something about, because I don't know how whether cloaks work well in warp.
They do. I think they do. I think cloaks just can't. You can't cloak and fire weapons generally, because there's so much power draw, and it's kind of pointless because as soon as you fire, it's very obvious where you are. So at that point, you might as well.
I knew there was something you couldn't do while cloaked.
Yeah, you can't generally. That's kind of the way in lore they balance the thing, though you'd think they would just throw on another warp core and say, but then again, you would just make yourself very obvious as soon as you fired. It's like you'd have to fire and then completely keep randomly moving so that you don't. But if you're gonna fire any sustained, you'd have to just.
What you'd want to do with that is drop a few photon mines.
Yeah, mines, but you'd also
drop the photon torpedoes, don't activate them, and then get out of the way and move around and drop them all over the place, and then fire them when your prey gets in the area.
Well, see, the
Pew,
problem
pew.
with that is, from my understanding, the photon torpedoes and that sort of thing aren't really that effective as long as shields are up. If shields are up, photons don't do that well against shields. Now, the actual phasers and plasma weapons and that sort of thing, disruptors, those work against shields and they work against hulls as well, but the photon stuff doesn't really work very well against shields. It does do some damage, but it doesn't do near as much damage as sustained energy weapons. Which, I mean, this could be just. I might be mixing up my game lore with my Star Trek lore, but from what I understand, like, yeah, you take them down with the phasers and then you fire your torpedoes. You try and punch a hole, weaken their shields, and then you fire the torpedoes. But because that's when your torpedoes are much more effective. But yeah, but at that point you might as well, drop out a cloak, because you're going to want to fire your energy weapons as well. Like, that's part of your. Well, they don't use warp cores. I have to backtrack. They don't use singularity core, but you won't. So dropping out a cloak is going to be, it's going to save you a lot of power. You got to reroute that power to the weapons. You're going to be obvious anyway. As soon as you start firing your disruptors, you're going to be really obvious where you're at anyway. So you might as well sneak up, drop cloak, disruptor, torpedoes, fire, and by the time when they start to realize you're there, cloak and get out of the way.
Pew, pew.
And then come back in and attack. If you're gonna hit and run and sort of chip away at them. But then again, a lot of their ships, the ones we see a lot of the Dideridex, and those are massive, and so you can just really, for the most part, just stand and fight, because there's not a lot of ships that are big enough to take you out. You have to be swarmed for that, and if you're at a disadvantage, the Romulans aren't going to fight at a disadvantage. They're going to cloak and leave before they put themselves at a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll find some other way around. They're not going to sit there and they're probably not going to get into a slugfest that they're not sure they're going to win.
Smart
Who
of
doesn't
them.
like bugs?
Anyway, anything else about this episode?
I love how it says, that's the most terrible thing ever.
Yeah. When he means to say beautiful, because he's, anti everything. He's like Oscar the Grouch.
It's just beautiful. Nah, I got nothing more. I can't wait to be able to go into space.
All right.
But
Okay.
I mean, besides the fact that it's the final frontier.